Hi there, Jeremy O'Carroll, founder and director of the Fitzroy Learning Centres here. In this video, what I'd like to do is run you through the pre-reader activities. In other words, these are the things you need to do before beginning to read your reader. So, what can we say about this then? Well, the first general principle that I'd like you to learn is that you need to get your students to learn all of the new material contained in the reader before they read it. Now, the reason for this is psychological. We don't want them to start reading and have to keep stopping because they're stumbling along because there's lots of new material they do not know how to decode. We want them to read fluently. We want them to have that fluent reading experience where they feel that reading is easy, where they feel it's doable, and as a result, that will build their confidence and they will want to keep learning to read. So we learn all the new stuff first, and only then do we tackle the reader. So what does the new materials consist of? Well, the first main bit of new material are the new sounds. Now you can find the new sounds on the back of the reader or on the inside. So once you've started to study the new sounds, another great place to work with them is in the A sheets of the workbooks. So they're the word school books. If you go to the A sheets of each number, so for instance, number 1A corresponds to reader 1. So if you just go to the appropriate A sheet, you'll have lots of work and exercises to be done on the new sounds introduced in that reader. Then another type of new information you'll find, another key area, are the new digraphs. And so obviously these won't be included in the very early readers because in readers 1 to 10 we only have one new digraph, but from about 11 to 20 onwards we tend to have a new digraph in each reader. So there again is new information you want to learn first. We've got special words, and again you can find these special words on the back of each reader. And this is really key new information that the students need to learn because you can't decode these special words, at least they can't decode them at the point they're reading them. And so you want them to learn them first. Otherwise, as we said, every time they get to a special word in the reader, they're going to stop and stumble. Now, you can get extra practice for the special words on the B sheets in the workbooks. So the B sheets in the word skills books. Another sort of new information you're going to need to get them to read are the unfamiliar words. Now, there aren't going to be too many of these because we're pretty careful in the vocab we use, but particularly if English is not a first language or maybe not one spoken at home, you're going to want your students to just learn any word which you feel may be unfamiliar to them. So generally speaking, for native English speakers, there aren't going to be very many at all, but you never know. There could be the odd word or two, so learn them first. Now, the trick to learning them too is to make them memorable. And, you know, if you can, like in one of the early readers, for instance, there's a pig did a jig. Now, they may not know what a jig is because it's a bit old-fashioned, but you could either play them a jig or you could get them to dance a jig. And so if you actually get them to take part in this by, say, dancing a jig, then they're going to remember what a jig is. But if you just tell them, then they're probably going to forget. So if you can show a picture of things, that helps them to remember it. If you can get the children to act things out and say maybe to each other what something is, then they'll remember it much more readily. Now, one way you can help learn all these things is scan them. So you can scan the reader for new sounds, for new digraphs, and for special words. What scanning means is you're not actually reading the page, you're just skimming through the page and locating those words or words with the sounds in them that contain, say, the new digraphs or whatever being taught. And so in this way, you're just getting children to locate these new sounds or digraphs or whatever they are, and it gives them extra practice. Another bit of revision that's useful to do before embarking on reading the reader is to study the words we know page, which can be found at the very start of a reader. And that's going to contain words which students have studied up to that point or words which students should be able to decode given the skills and information they've learnt up to that point. Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about special words now. Now, the interesting thing about special words is that you can't learn a rule for them, or the students haven't learned a rule for them. So Some special words actually are what we will later on call not so special words. So in other words, it's a rule that the students haven't learnt yet. But other special words are what we call very special words. And so the very special words are ones which you just can never learn a rule. For instance, an example of a very special word might be I. The I are either I as in me, or even I as in the I you see with is a good instance of a very special word. If we give some examples of not so special words, then you might think of a word like hey. Now, let's imagine children haven't learnt the digraph A-Y-A. Then if they came across the word hey, they couldn't decode it because they don't have the skills yet. But once they've learnt the digraph A, they're going to be able to decode words with the A digraph in them, so long as there aren't other parts of the word which they can't decode. So they're going to be able to happily decode the A. So a word like may or hey, they'd be able to decode without any problem. So here you have an instance of a word which might start out as special because the students haven't learnt the digraph in it or the spelling rule. But once they've learnt that digraph or spelling rule, then they'll have no trouble decoding it. So it turns from a special word to a not so special word. So very special words you can't learn a rule for. Not so special words you can. But at the time they're introduced, the student just doesn't know that rule or digraph. Okay, now another thing we should note is the word a is categorized as a special word. You might say, well, why is that? And the reason is that when we're getting children to say it, at least in the early readers, we make sure that they pronounce it a instead of say at, or what's more commonly pronounced as ah. You'll notice that if we really read a fat cat, naturally we'd say it just like that. We'd say a fat cat. But if we read it a fat cat, then the a gives the sound a, and a can get confused with the sound the letter u makes. And this is a problem because children will then start writing the sound a with the letter a. So if you wanted to write the word sun in the sky, they might write it S-A-N because they keep seeing what they see as a letter a, and it keeps giving the sound a. So important thing, whenever you come across the word a, so a by itself, make sure, at least in the early readers, maybe readers 1 through to 7 or 1 through to 10, get them to say a instead of a, even though it is a little bit unnatural. And as a result of that, though, they won't confuse it with the sound the letter u makes. So give it the long sound a as in ape. Okay, now just a brief point on the word skills. I'd like to note that they have a very consistent structure. And so by that I mean all the way through you're going to find things like the A sheets are to do with the new sounds, the B sheets, the special words, the F sheets, comprehension. And that stays the same all the way through from reader 1 to reader 60. So they're pretty easy to use because you really know what to expect. Now a brief point on reading rules. Reading rules, we tend to forget about them. Reading rules are things like, you read from left to right. Now, in English that is. Now, because we're so used to them, we forget about them. But you do need to teach children these reading rules. But the thing is this, if you're teaching small children and you say when we read from left to right, then they probably don't know what their left for right is, or they'll get very confused. So what you actually have to do is show them. Maybe you can move across the classroom from left to right. You can show them a pen, under words moving from left to right. So if you show them the left to right movement, for instance, then they'll remember it. But if you just tell them the idea, when we read from left to right, etc., then they are likely to get confused, not understand, or just forget. So you've always got to show children where you can. Okay, so they're just a few things to remember about pre-reader activities. Hope this helps you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.